This is 2011's bloodrayne, the Third Reich. Warning, spoilers ahead. We immediately kick things off with a flashback to Rayne's childhood when her mother hid her from Kagan. Rayne tells us a basic recap of how Rayne is a vampire, and she tells us about Hitler and his rise to power. I wasn't expecting a history lesson on Hitler here. I think pretty much everyone knows about Hitler at this point. Thankfully, they give us a quick rundown on Rayne being a vampire, so we don't have to worry about the character being shrouded in secrecy for half the movie this time. Then we watch as a train full of Jewish people makes its way down the rail until it's come to a stop at a station where Nazi soldiers are waiting for it. When the train stops, the Nazis unload the train cars, and they march the people down the road until they come to a camp. As they walk the new occupants past the older workers, Rayne narrates to us about the evil of the Nazis. Again, I feel like this is common knowledge at this point. But wait, the resistance pops out of the woods, and they attack the other train. Hey, at least Rayne's played by the same actress this time. She definitely looks different. Rayne got a lot more bodacious and edgy since the Wild West time period. When the resistance members notice that Rayne is actually on their side, they make sure not to fire on her. Eventually, Rayne runs into the commandant, and he tries to ram her through with a piece of rebar. Rayne easily overpowers him, but she doesn't notice the Nazi that snuck up behind her. The Nazi shoots her in the back, and her own blood managed to splash onto the commandant. Rayne takes care of that guy, and she rams the rebar into the commandant before feeding on him. When she leaves the train car, she finds Nathaniel, Vasil, and Magda, and Nathaniel introduces themselves to her. Rayne doesn't warm up to them very quickly, but Nathaniel pieces things together. The resistance members open the car doors expecting to find weapons for their cause, but they end up finding more prisoners instead. They bring the prisoners with them on their way to the camp, but back in the train cars, the commandant is still alive and pulls the rebar out of his gut. That night, more Nazis arrive to investigate the scene, and Lieutenant is the one to discover the commandment. Back at the resistance camp, Rayne shows up to eat dinner, but Nathaniel points out that she can't rush perfection. Rayne can't help but be cold-hearted in her reactions, but they quickly move on to conversation about their next plan. Nathaniel thinks that they can just keep freeing trains until the war's over, but Rayne thinks that they need to put an end to things as soon as possible. By the end of their conversation, Rayne has had enough, and she decides to start heading out. Meanwhile, the lieutenant arrives at a Nazi camp to question the doctor, and he finds that the doctor is cutting open a vampire to research it. The lieutenant doesn't have the stomach for their research, but the doctor has no plans to stop. The lieutenant finally pulls him aside, and he tells him that he's been restationed. At first, the doctor isn't too keen on leaving his work, but then he realizes that they must have found something absolutely amazing to have him be escorted to a higher position. After being taken to headquarters, the lieutenant wants to know how the commandant is still alive. But the doctor just tells him that he's a common vampire now. The doctor is furious that he was pulled away from his work on vampires just to investigate another common vampire. But wait, there's more. When the doctor hears that the assault on the train happened at daylight, everything changes. Meanwhile, Rayne is about to ambush more Nazis, and I'm wondering who came up with her costume design for the movie. This movie should have been called Bloodrayne the Bodacious Nazi Slayer. We're not even worried about vampires anymore. Back in headquarters, Lieutenant tells the doctor that he's going into the commandant's lair, but the doctor wants him to be as careful as possible. Once inside, the commandant knocks out Lieutenant, but when the doctor tells him that he can help with his transition, they become the best of friends. Across town, Rayne goes to a whorehouse where she decides to take a break from killing Nazis to get an essential oil massage. When she hears a woman calling out for help, she decides to throw on her robe and go investigate. But when she finds out that it's actually a Nazi beating one of the women, she decides to give him a bit of hardball justice. Why do I keep watching movies with genitalia mutilation? I cringe every time it happens and they just keep putting them in the movies. At least it wasn't like the movie Teeth. That was a nightmare. Meanwhile, the doctor is playing chess with Commandant, but the Commandant seems to be struggling with his anger and patience. The Commandant wants the doctor's help in healing, but the doctor tells him that it isn't an exact science per se. The lieutenant believes that they should take action against the commandant, but the doctor reminds him that the area of science is his expertise. Back at the brothel, one of the girls decides to give Rayne a complimentary massage as a way to say thank you for handling the soldier. Go figure there's a spy in the brothel. The whore is trying to exchange information on Rayne for a chance to run the bordello. That's it? Not a very ambitious one. When she comes into the commandant's office, she finds dead bodies wrapped in linen, but she jumps right to her business. At first, the commandant's response is very lackluster, but this tune quickly changes when he realizes that Rayne is the one that he seeks. After getting the information out of her, he comes over to her and feeds on her blood. That's what ambition gets you at a time like this, apparently. Everybody backstabbing everybody. Somehow, the commandant's able to get a whole squad of Nazis to the bordello before Rayne gets her happy ending. When Rayne sees the Commandant, she finds out that she's essentially his mother in the way that she created him through her blood. When she takes off, the soldiers open fire, but Commandant reminds them that he wants her alive. One of the bullets manages to graze her though, and the doctor rushes up to the balcony to collect a sample of her blood. When the doctor gets back to headquarters, we find that the traitor's been reanimated and locked up. The doctor tests her immunities, and he points out that her immunities are less than the Commandant's. He wants to make it so that she's immune to every aspect of threat. The doctor ends up getting seduced by the traitor, and he comes straight into her cage. When she attacks him, he splashes her with holy water and stabs her with a stake. Just as she dissolves to dust, the Commandant shows up and requests his presence upstairs. Back at the resistance camp, Rayne tries to gather dynamite and anything powerful enough to kill the Commandant. But Nathaniel realizes that the Commandant is more than a common vampire. He's a vampire with the entire Nazi army behind him. He finally gets Rayne to calm down, and he assures her that they'll join her in the fight soon enough. In town, Magda tries to come on to a couple of Nazi soldiers, and she does her best to get the men drunk. Then she grabs a gun from under the table and kills the higher-up soldier. Suddenly, Nathaniel and the others come into the bar, and Magda starts to interrogate the lower Nazi soldier. Smooth. There's definitely an Inglourious Basterds vibe going on at times. In fact, there are quite a few scenes that I swear I've seen somewhere else. And now, all of a sudden, Magda's actually one of the code breakers that can break the Enigma code. What? Nathaniel tells Rayne goodbye, and the two of them go their separate ways. Rayne starts making her way down the street, but she's quickly ambushed by two vampires with swords. Rayne quickly kills the vampires, and that night she dreams about being in a castle. She starts off by trying to find Nathaniel, but she's quickly attacked by Vampire Hitler. Yeah, that's where all this was headed. Pretty soon they're going to say that Rayne was actually the one that killed Hitler and made it look like a suicide. Across town, the Commandant pays the lieutenant a visit, and he tells him about how he wants to put his tracking skills to good use. The lieutenant understands that the Commandant is talking about making his powers even greater by becoming a vampire. And he tries to put up a fight. It's useless as the Commandant sinks his teeth into his neck. Eventually, the doctor arrives to check in on the new patient, and they use a vial of Rayne's blood to help the lieutenant track her. Across town, Nathaniel comes across Rayne's lair, and she seems to be letting her guard down a bit until she sees that Nathaniel has invited other members to her lair. Once Vasil comes up to meet them, the lieutenant appears, and he demands answers for what Rayne has done to him and the Commandant. After Vasil beats the lieutenant within an inch of death, Rayne questions him, and they find out that the Germans used Magda to get to her. Nathaniel almost loses it when he hears that the Nazis have her, but Rayne controls him. Rayne gets as much information out of the lieutenant, and once she's sure that he's not going to give her any more, she stabs him in the heart with a stake. They rush to the bar where Magda's at, and they find that the Nazis just arrived. As Magda is loaded into a truck, Rayne, Nathaniel, and Vasil open fire on the Nazis, but they ultimately have to retreat. When Magda is tied up in an abandoned warehouse, we see that the Commandant has arrived to personally interrogate her. And he bites her too. Meanwhile, Nathaniel and what's left of the resistance go back to HQ to find that the Nazis had killed everyone that was stationed there. Rayne assures them that they'll get Magda, but they only have one good shot at accomplishing this. Rayne attacks the warehouse where Magda's being held, and Nathaniel shows up with the rest of the resistance to check inside. As they make their way through, Vasil finds Magda tied up and he goes to cut her down. Suddenly, Magda shows that she's really a vampire now, and Vasil has Rayne stab her with a wooden stake. When they go through the rest of the warehouse, they find that it's completely empty until they run into other vampire Nazis. Eventually, Rayne tells Nathaniel to shoot the windows to burn the vampires, and the Commandant shows up to stable Rayne in the back. Now Rayne and Nathaniel are captured and they're taken to jail. The Commandant tells Nathaniel that he's going to take Rayne and himself to Berlin to see Hitler himself, and the doctor has Rayne hung up at his lab. Doc's got the perfect setup here. Technically, he doesn't even need her anymore. He's just keeping her for sport at this point. He's got enough blood to transform the entire Nazi army. Rayne and Nathaniel are loaded up in transports, and the convoy makes its way to Berlin. Further down the road, Vasil is camping with what's left of the resistance, and they're trying to set up an ambush point for the convoy. On the truck, Nathaniel gets a little handsy with Rayne's unconscious body, but when she comes to, she starts getting handsy herself. That's not how things work. These two are about to be killed or used for experimentation, and Rayne was completely unconscious. I find it hard to believe that she woke up being groped during a life-and-death situation and her thought was, yeah, let's get it on. Doesn't matter what would actually happen though. This is exactly what happens. Imagine the dynamite going off as they finish. Talk about rocking their world. The resistance members open fire on the Nazis, and Rayne and Nathaniel escape from the back of the truck just before it explodes. A firefight ensues, and Rayne does her thing. The commandant decides that he needs a power top-off, and he takes a vial of Rayne's blood from the doctor to drink it. The doctor takes off through the woods, but he's quickly taken out by the resistance sniper. Eventually, the commandant and Rayne get into a physical confrontation, and she takes him out with a big rock to the head. Yep, it was just that quick. The most abrupt villain death ever. So everything's wrapped up then? Nathaniel and Rayne look over the aftermath, and they assure each other that they've got more work to do. Later, we see a truck pulling into a concentration camp, and Rayne and the others burst out of the back to take out the Nazis. Then, the credits roll. That's it. The entire series in a nutshell. I think that it would be really cool to see a full-fledged film on the game series, but for now, this cult classic series will have to do. Give it a shot. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.